Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, welcome. I am really happy to introduce you to my guests today, Jennifer Rock and Michael Voss. Jennifer and Mike spent 2 decades careening through corporate America and barely lived to write about it. As company journalists, speechwriters, and C-suite advisors, they stockpiled insider stories and cautionary tales, which they turned into 2 novels, BS Incorporated and Operation Clusterpuck. Both live near Minneapolis, where they own a communications agency, speak to groups of all sizes, and share their perspectives in publications like the Washington Post. Please join me in welcoming Jennifer Rock and Michael Voss. Well, hey, Jennifer and Michael, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
It's great to be on.
Yeah. So as you know, this is a podcast about transitions, and the two of you have certainly been through several transitions from your corporate careers and also personal transitions that have impacted different decisions that you've made professionally. So tell us about the earlier years and then how you decided to go out on your own.
Sure, happy to. So Mike and I have known each other for like half a lifetime. We've known each other for about 16, 17 years. We worked together for 12 years at Best Buy headquarters here in Minneapolis. There we ran the employee communications department. So, it was a very big job for a very big company. We had about 170,000 employees across the world. They were very high stress kind of jobs. And there was a point a few years back where Mike and I sat in a very long 4-hour meeting. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners have sat in exactly that kind of meeting where nobody's listening and people are arguing and nothing productive is getting done. And it was just soul crushing. And Mike and I kind of made an excuse. We escaped. We went to our patio, to be honest. And we had some cocktails and we hatched this plan over cocktails, as some of the best plans are hatched. We kind of pinky swore and said, we have seen a lot of things in our corporate careers. We have collected a lot of stories. We've known a lot of characters, and, we should really write a book. So it was that pinky swear to say, you know what, the two of us should really plan this out and write a book. And that is where the first of our now 2 corporate novels have come from.
Yeah. And, it's funny. I've heard people make agreements over a handshake. I'm not sure I've heard of 2 corporate colleagues making a pinky swear agreement, but that does kind of fit in with both the serious tone of what you were really agreeing to, and yet both the humorous side of what you've done together. So I'd love to hear about how that developed between the two of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously the pinky swear, it's true. We did it. One way to tell the story. And I think it's fair to say we didn't fully grasp what we were signing up to do in that moment. We knew we were going to continue working while we tried to write our first novel. And we did that for a number of years, working on the novel on the side, or as we like to say, on flights, nights, and weekends, when we would work on the book. But eventually we got to a point where it was done. We had revised it a few times. We had pitched it to publishers, and we said, you know what? It's time. It's time to actually make the leap and quit our jobs without, much of a safety net. We were able to negotiate severance, which was helpful, certainly. But it was a big jump that I think took us a while to really get there and to understand what we had signed up to do with what sounded like just a fun pinky swear over cocktails turned out to be a life-changing decision over the course of a number of years.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So you were in that soul-crushing meeting, And that sounds like that was kind of a little bit of a straw that maybe broke a camel's back, that this wasn't the first thought or conversation you had had, and you started talking about writing a book together. But I believe, if I'm correct, that you spent several more years still working for Best Buy, that you don't harbor any negative feelings towards Best Buy at all. You're very grateful for the time you had there. I'm aware of that. And yet there was something else sort of churning within both of you that was spurned through the book, but you didn't necessarily have the idea that this would then launch into creating your own business, did you, back then?
No, not really. I think, and you're right, there was something churning inside each of us for a very long time. Both Mike and I have been lifelong writers separately, long before we knew each other. Mike would write little stories to read to the kids on the school bus on the way to school. I was publishing little poems in my grade school newsletter, long before we knew each other. And so, we had careers both in communications. So again, we've always been in the communications profession, always been writers, but just very, I guess, frustrated novelists at heart. That was always inside of each of us, that really wanted to entertain people with stories and write stories and to share a perspective in a different way, which is what we ended up doing with BS Incorporated and Operation Clusterpuck. But yeah, and you're absolutely right. We harbor no ill feelings towards Best Buy. It was just, each of us had spent about 20 some years in corporate America. And there was just that point where like you said, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily call it the final straw, but certainly that epiphany moment where I think we both got to at the same time, that said, I think there's something different. And if not now, I don't know when. Mm-hmm. So again, we were very, very lucky, like Mike said, to get severance and to be able to be in a company and in positions that we could stay in for a few more years until we figured things out, until we could finish the manuscript and figured out what we wanted to do on the book side of it. But you still need to make your paycheck. You still need to make a living, and books, authoring books, that only happens to a few lucky few authors. And so our communications agency that we developed about 5 years ago, that was really the offshoot of, let's take our expertise and be able to apply that to different companies now and make that choice of who we get to work for and to learn different companies and learn new things, which is much different than working for the same company for 12 or 15 years.
Yes. And let's be clear that writing a book, I don't know what our listeners know about that, but I know, and that writing a book is not a revenue generating activity. And it's not just the act of writing the book, but even getting a book out there, it's not a moneymaker. So clearly there was something driving both of you to want to write a book at that point. There was something within you that wanted to express itself. And over that time, then it turned into the business that you have today. And as you said, you were both fortunate in that you were able to also take care of sort of the practicalities of life with the severance, with the financial side of things, which I know is something that a lot of people, when they're considering making a move as bold as both of you were able to make, that really helps. But I also know that you each had different, family configurations and situations that also put different, a lot of people, when they're trying to make the kind of change that you made, also have to think about, well, do I have the external or the other people in our life support to make these kinds of changes? And I know you each had different levels of support around that as well.
Absolutely. And so for me, I'm married and I have a couple of boys who are teenagers now. They were a little bit younger at the time we made the jump. And my wife was wonderfully supportive. She knew that writing a book was a dream of mine. She knew that we would start a business and bring in some income separate from the book, because that wouldn't be enough to hold up my end of the bargain. And for my kids, it was sort of a lesson on both sides, I would say. Mm-hmm. On one hand, I was able to show them to trust yourself, take the leap, do what you love, and really most of your life. And I think that was a great lesson for them. At the same time, I took a significant pay cut, and they had to go without some things that they had gotten used to when Dad was working full time at a big job in a big company.
I'm
And so
glad you brought that up, because a lot of times when we're thinking about our careers, I don't know that we realize how much our children are actually watching and observing us. And really, if you think about it, that's our primary model for the world of work or how we conduct ourselves around work. Our children are watching us. And, what a great model for them to understand the different choices you made, and then how they could even participate in that in some ways.
Sure, absolutely. That was my story. And to be honest with you, Tammy, Jennifer is someone I admire because it took a lot of courage, more so on her part than it did on mine, because she didn't have that same support. So Jennifer, I wonder if you'd be willing to share.
Sure. No, I'd be happy to. So at the time that we quit our jobs and kind of leaped off the cliff towards writing a book, I was going through a divorce at the same time. And I don't have kids, and I was losing my kind of emotional relationship support, as well as, frankly, my financial support on that side as well. And I mean, it's a change that I needed to make, and I don't regret a moment of that. But I'll be honest, I mean, it was difficult. I mean, that's a lot of change for a person to take all at once.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of considerations that I had to make in terms of how much risk I was willing to take from a financial perspective and a personal perspective. And, and I would strongly tell your listeners that you need a subjective person to sit down with and talk these things out. And for me, it was a counselor. I had never been to therapy before. And I would strongly suggest that, again, a third person that you can sit down with and say, not only from a relationship and a personal perspective, but I've never run a business before. I've never run a small business. I've never been an entrepreneur. Help me think through what I need to do and the place I need to have my head in to make this work, and how to be a good partner in a 2-person business, and how to, there's so much involved in that. So again, I think for me, it was a huge turning point in my life, in a very difficult time. But you can't take that all on yourself. And I was very, very, very fortunate to have not only a really supportive and awesome business partner in Mike, but also a really smart therapist who would put questions back at me and really boosted my confidence to let me know that I could do this.
Yeah, really, congratulations, Jennifer, on that. I mean, and it sounds like, you did go about this with your eyes wide open. How sometimes you go into something knowing that you're drawn to it, it feels right. This is why we call this work from the inside out. There's something inside you that's saying, I've got to do this. And at the same time, you built other support systems around you to make sure that you were taking these steps with a good support network around you. And you did it.
Well, thank you. And again, that I cannot stress enough that support system, whatever that support system looks like for you in your life. Yeah. You just can't do this alone. Right. You need somebody to talk to. You need somebody to bounce ideas off of. You need somebody, on those down days when you think, gosh, maybe this wasn't the best idea, or maybe I can't do this. You need somebody to help talk that through with you. I can't stress that enough.
And for both of you, it's not just because you went through a difficult, breakup of your marriage. Either way, this could put a lot of stress on a marriage too, to make this kind of change. So, not that we're trying to delve deeply into your personal lives, but these are the kinds of things that I see as a coach all the time. I often will find myself sitting with a client, and sometimes I feel like I'm almost talking to their spouse and not them, because a lot of the doubts and the fears and the things that are coming out of their mouths are really coming from their spouse, not from them. They're telling me what they want, but then all the fears and the doubts are all the things that their spouses are telling them that they're afraid of. So you really do have to find some place to get on the same page in order to be able to move forward, even with the fears. I mean, fear is always going to be part of the process, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's also, for me anyway, for me personally, I was successful in my career and we were going to take a dip, not only in income, but just in terms of success. Certainly we wrote a book, we got it published, and that's wonderful. But you sort of pumped yourself up to say, I'm a successful person. And I struggled a little bit with how much to share. Of course, I was very proud that we wrote the book, but I wasn't, this was not going to allow me to buy a yacht, and we weren't selling the movie rights, so we weren't just wildly over the top successful yet, so I wanted to be honest about the fact that it's a grind. But at the same time, nobody wants to say like, I'm not successful anymore. It's just a different kind of success, I think. And you have to find a way to square that in your own mind to say, it's not, the paycheck doesn't define the success. It's the happiness, it's the achievement, it's the doing what you love to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, because I think when people do decide they're drawn to something different than what they've been doing, it's usually because they are redefining what success means to them. And part of the way that they redefine success is based on that their former definition of success isn't working for them anymore, right? So that's what you were stepping into, as a newer definition of success.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And again, that was a huge mental shift for me too, because I think most of us, especially I would say most of us who work our ways up through the corporate ladder, define success as the next title, the next promotion, the bigger paycheck, the bigger bonus. And there's a ladder part of that, but it's also like you're on this escalator that just keeps on moving up, and you have to choose to step off of it. And when you do step off of it, I felt lost for a little bit. I mean, I agree with what Mike said, where, you define success so clearly in your head. And now, like, I don't have that. I don't have that next promotion. I don't have that. Like, I'm on my own. Now what do I do? And yeah, it's a big mind shift, but the trade-off is amazing. Yeah, I may not have that, that quarterly bonus coming from a corporation anymore, but I do have the choice of clients that we work with, and I've learned new industries, and I am feeling valuable in completely different ways. And by the way, I get to knock off early on a beautiful summer day in Minneapolis and go do something that I really love and enjoy, and go take my dog for a walk around the lake. And I could never do that in my corporate job. So yeah, I mean, happiness plays a big part in this. Yeah. And I don't want to put too sunny of a smiley face on this, but because it takes a whole lot of work to get there. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But it's a trade-off, and you have to just be really clear with yourself. Like Mike said, what does success look like?
Right. So what does it look like now as well? There's a couple of things I want to ask. One is, I'm curious what it looks like now that you're several years into it, but I'm also curious about the juxtaposition between the desire to write novels, because now you've written 2, and being novelists, but also being consultants. And do those fit together, or are they completely separate activities? Where do they fit in? Because I know we want to make sure that people understand that you have many offerings here.
Yeah, absolutely. And, for us, it really fits in really well. And I don't know if that's just because we're odd or if we really do have, complementary jobs, I guess. So we tend to have 2 to 3 active clients at a time where we're helping them with communication strategy of some sort, usually internal communications, helping drive engagement of a group of employees if they're dispersed in different locations, et cetera. And when the client work is a little slower, we will focus on the book, and it might be writing the book. We're finishing one part of the book or that kind of thing. Right now, we're actively promoting our second book, Operation Clusterpuck. We do have a couple of active clients that keep us busy, but allow time for these kinds of conversations where we can talk about our book and those kinds of things. And for us, it works really well because we're both learners. And so we love learning new industries, learning new clients. As Jennifer said, We love coming in and helping and making a difference in a company. And because we write in the workplace, right? Our stories take place in the workplace. We're always getting new material, and we would certainly never betray the confidences of a client or anything like that. But just being in different workplaces and working with people, you see the various kinds of things that happen, the situations, and the types of people you meet. So that keeps our writing fresh, because we're constantly opening new doors and going into new places and meeting new people. So it seems to fit very well together for us.
And I just have to add a really quick story. We were working with a client who happens to be the biggest privately held company in the world. And we were on a conference call, and there's a bunch of people in the room, and it was I won't even go into details. It was just, let's just say it was a circus. It was a circus of a meeting, as we have all been in. And when the meeting ended and our client, pressed the button to end the call, she looked across the table to me and said, "When you put this in a future book, just change our names." Like she knew I was taking mental notes. Like we know you guys write dark humor novels, and like, this was just material we just gave you. It was really funny. But yeah, our clients have been very understanding, and there's a pretty definite line between our novels and what we do.
Have you ever used your books in your work with clients? Like, this is what not to do?
We tend to sell ourselves and our experience first, and we talk about the books secondary.
Okay.
We don't want anyone thinking we're solely using them for material. So we lead with, we can help you, we can make a difference. And then, over the course of that, building that relationship, they tend to find out that we're novelists as well. So it works out pretty well.
Yeah, I would think that would just be intriguing to your clients to know that there's this other part of your partnership that would make you an attractive team to hire.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that makes our business partnership work really well, and what makes our business partnership really special. I think that Mike and I have known each other for so long, and we certainly have a similar perspective on a lot of things, but we also fill in each other's gaps in a lot of ways. And that's rare and awesome in a partnership. But also, I think what we bring to clients is certainly a really tightly woven partnership. I mean, if we can write a fictional book together and have, our characters sound like they're written by one person, like we can write in one voice, the two of us, like think of what we can do for a company.
Yeah.
We are quite interchangeable when it comes to serving CEOs and C-level executives and writing speeches and, doing things like that, because we can assume many voices and perspectives and characters that way. So it's an interesting way to look at it.
Oh, so part of what you do is you write speeches for C-level execs?
Yeah, absolutely. We ghostwrite speeches and, sometimes just memos or, mass emails that go out to, a variety of people. Or just recently, we have a new client. We've been helping ghostwrite reports to the senior executive team. So that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, do you also help with communication strategy for those folks so that they can, like you're teaching them to fish, so to speak, so that they can communicate more effectively with their teams and their organizations?
Absolutely. And that's really our primary value proposition, if you will. Our primary offering is to help set a strategy at a very high level and then build out a way to execute against that strategy. And then, as you said, very often we're turning that over to them. And they take the work on from there. So we help them take a step back, determine what they're trying to accomplish from a business perspective.
Right.
How communications play a role in driving that and helping the whole organization get behind it and move in the same direction. And we'll help early on, usually with the execution, and then be able to just turn pieces of it over and step away cleanly. And hopefully we've made a difference in their business.
And it's more on the internal side versus how they might be communicating with customers or external.
Yeah, for some small businesses and some entrepreneurs, we have certainly helped with marketing and public relations. Our area of expertise is much more in the internal space, especially larger companies in things, very complex projects like mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah.
Or where you're combining companies, combining employees, employee bases. I think Mike mentioned earlier, it's the distributed workforces where you have to communicate to employees across time zones and shifts, and reach very hard to reach employees. And anybody who's worked in a company knows that in order to steer the ship in a different direction, you need to get everybody rowing the same direction.
Yeah.
And that's a really difficult thing to do when you're a leader who needs to stand in front of employees in some fashion and paint the vision and make them interested in spending their career with that company and showing them the value of what they do. And that's tough because you have got to build trust to do that. You have to be very smart in informing the employees, in catching their attention. And so that is where the strategic communication comes in. And that's what we really love to do.
Wow. That is so vitally important. And in a way, it ties in so beautifully with this podcast because it really is about transitions and change. And how do people, either on an individual level or organization-wide, how do you engage in some kind of a change where you can either dissipate or eliminate some level of fear or mistrust, whether it's internal within yourself or across an organization, develop buy-in even within yourself or within your family, within your extended network, or within your organization, right? So in a way, your own experience transitioning sort of like, it's like dropping a pebble in a pond and then going further out, right? And now you've rippled that out into very large organizations. And it's, in this day and age, it's so vitally important what you're doing because you hear all the stories of people whose lives are really shaken up during these mergers and acquisitions. And if things were communicated in a different way, it could really make a big difference in terms of how successful some of these changes occur.
Absolutely. And we've seen, of course, examples of good and examples of bad in that regard. And you're so right about it starting on the inside, because very often when we see a leader who does a poor job of demonstrating that empathy or just even showing some respect in delivering bad news, it's very often because they don't have the confidence themselves, or they're worried about how they're going to come across. And that, as you said, that creates a ripple effect in a negative sense. And I'm sure you see this all the time with your coaching work about the work that these leaders very often need to do to look inside themselves first, and only then can they really be effective in leading people right direction, because people trust them and want to follow them.
Right. They often don't realize the impact that they have. They really don't see it. And so I'm sure that's a big part of the work that you have is whether it's writing a speech or consulting on a strategic level, is really getting them to see that even not just what they say, and more so even how they say it, is so vitally important.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the difference between, in our industry, it's the difference between strategic communication and counseling and the tactical, writing of communication. So I could write a speech that sounds very good about why this business has acquired this other business and have all the right speaking points and all the right conclusions, and be able to hand it to any leader and say, go say this, and it's going to sound great. But the strategic part of that is understanding the leader and understanding where they are in accepting the change, and getting them to understand where the employees are in terms of understanding what's happening. And like Mike said, that empathy and that understanding, and that we are in a very relationship driven industry. And that's why you really have to get inside that leader's head. You have to understand where the audience is at and be able to deliver something in a way that will move the needle in a way that the business needs it to. And that's not an easy task. That really is getting inside the heart and the mind of a leader before they put that speech in their hands.
So if we go back to the origin of this conversation with that soul-crushing meeting that you were in, we could say that your business solutions, is a soul-fueling business, not a soul-crushing business, right?
We like to think so. Absolutely. We might have to steal that line from you.
You can take it away. But it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's just funny that, out of something like that soul crushing meeting, we ended up changing our lives and our careers. But, I think it's a really interesting lesson for companies and leaders to think about, is that, unfortunately, those soul crushing meetings are happening in every single company, across this country every single day. And companies are so worried about turnover, and they're so worried about retaining good talent, and they're so worried about the knowledge level that they're losing when people leave. And it's like, well, again, put yourself in your employee's shoes and think about that soul crushing meeting, or that meeting that should have been an email, or or anything that's going on, and realize that there are really good, loyal, lifelong employees like us who that's going to be the final straw. And that's one meeting over the top that makes us look at each other and say, we have got to do something different.
Yeah. Well, hopefully between what you do and what I do, we're having that kind of an impact.
We're
right?
changing the world, right?
Yes.
One soul fueling meeting at a time.
That's right. But that's the key to transitions. That's the thing I've been finding out as I continue to have these conversations, is it's not an overnight success kind of thing. You've been at this for 5 years now, actually longer. You've been percolating and brewing this like a good cup of coffee for a long time. And so, looking back and looking at where you are today, what would you say is the key piece of information or advice you might give somebody who's on the cusp of making that decision to make some kind of a change in their career or their professional life?
That's a great question. I think for me, I'm sort of borrowing from other people here, but I think you don't need to think about it as one massive leap and one life-changing decision. It may arrive at that point, but you can break it down into smaller pieces and you start working toward the goal. And that's really the way it worked for Jennifer and I. As I said earlier, we didn't realize the pinky swear in that moment would have us leaving our jobs at exactly 18 months later or whatever it was. But we worked toward completing the novel. We worked toward positioning ourselves where we could leave our jobs and get a severance payment. And we took a bunch of steps to get there and then make that leap. The leap is the big, sexy or scary thing, depending on how you look at it. But you can break it down and get there in a way that you're much more confident and comfortable taking that leap.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I'd just add to that because I agree 100%. That's just good project management, right? You don't make one great big change. You break that down into all the steps and the process and the plan that you need to make that change. And that may not be the big sexy thing. Like, that sounds super boring, but that's how you know you're going to be successful. And I would say within that, speaking very personally, think about the amount of risk that you are willing to take on.
Right.
And think about the amount of change that will be good, that may be difficult, but still is healthy for you.
Yeah.
Because, leaving your job and starting a new career and starting a business and getting divorced all at once, probably not for everyone.
Right.
So, what I'm saying is just think about the level of risk that you're willing to take, and especially financially, make sure that you have a safety net, an escape plan, whatever is going to make you feel secure, so that when you do take those little jumps and finally that big leap, that you know that you will be taken care of in some fashion, that you can take care of yourself.
Yeah. Great advice. Thank you so much. So if people want to follow your work or learn more about what you're up to, what are some of the best ways for them to either find you or find your books?
Sure. Well, you can find our Facebook page. It's Rock and Voss Books on Facebook. We also have a website for the business and the book, and they're linked. The two websites are linked to each other. So there is rock.voss.com, which is our business website, and rockandvossbooks.com, which is our website where you can learn more about our books. What am I missing, Jennifer?
Yeah, basically we're Rock and Voss Books most everywhere. Instagram, Facebook. You can search for us on Twitter. As our friends and family would tell you, we're kind of everywhere. You can't escape us right now. So.
Well, and we will have all the links in the show notes, so people will have no trouble finding you.
Yeah, and if any of your listeners out there have some good zany or otherwise like exasperating corporate stories to share, we are always willing to build our folder for future books.
Well, great. I'm sure people always have a good story to tell. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, Mike and Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today. This has been just a lot of fun to talk to you and to hear about your journey and both the important work you're doing and the twists of humor that you bring to it.
Well, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, we have loved being on, and yeah, it's absolutely important to keep your sense of humor through all of this.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.